Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy. And today I want to talk about what the elephant in the room, especially for new play therapists, or maybe you've been using play therapy for a little while and you're kind of feeling lost, or maybe you've been doing it for a while and you feel lost. I know sometimes I feel lost. In my work with play therapists over the last 15 years doing supervision and consulting, there are some things that I've noticed come up over and over and over. And this is actually the reason why I created some online courses as a way to help play therapists really recognize what the root of the problem is so that you can get some help to get through it. And so if you're interested, I will be talking about those. Stick around to the end. I'll talk about those a little bit more. Today's episode, I really want to focus on, are you feeling stuck using play therapy? So how do you know when you're feeling stuck? And this is something I've noticed a lot with, especially the new people that I provide consulting with, is really not even recognizing when you are feeling stuck. And the reason that's important is when you realize that you're feeling stuck because you're having some of the symptoms that I'm about to go over, then you can figure out a strategy to get back on track and get those amazing results that you want to get for your clients. Because after all, we get into the profession because we want to make a difference in the lives of children and their families. I feel like as play therapists, we have the opportunity to impact not only just the child for generations to come, their generation, their children's children. We have the ability to impact an entire family system. And I'm a firm believer that children exist within the context of their family. And to facilitate change, you really need to look at their whole system and then figure out what needs to happen from there. So let's get started. First, I would love to know who's here. Post your name in the comments. If you're watching live, I'd love to know who's here. What population are you working with? What play therapy model are you using? Where are you working? Go ahead and post your name in the comments. Questions that you have. One thing that I want to remind people, this is a public forum. And so you want to make sure when you're asking questions or making comments, we want to make sure not to talk about specific clients because it's not very private in a public format. And you can speak in generalities with your questions. Also, if you're watching on the replay, I would still love to know who's here, who's watching, what population you work with. If you're watching on the replay, go ahead and post your name in the comments, where you're from, what population you work with. And if you are listening on my new podcast, Next Level Play Therapy, go ahead and post your name, post in the comments, questions. And also feel free, if you feel like this information is helpful, please feel free to share it, to like it, share it across your social media. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on the podcast, I'd love for you to leave a review. And that also gives me some great feedback of what's useful, what's not useful. So let's get started. All right. Are you feeling stuck using play therapy? Some signs that you're feeling stuck using play therapy are that you find yourself worrying a lot about whether or not the interventions are working. You feel like you're your interventions aren't working. And then you start to get nervous, or you start to think, oh, that's not working, I'm just going to use a different one. And so you start kind of throwing different interventions together without necessarily understanding why you're doing it or the intent, and how does that fit in to the overall issue that you have identified that your clients are going through. Which brings me to the next one, is in your sessions. I don't know if you've had this happen. Post in the comments. I'd be shocked. I feel like we all, especially in the beginning, we all have this experience with our new clients, where they ask you, when is the session over? How much longer do we have? And it's not in the way where it feels like they're like rushed for time, like, oh, I have to get it all done. I have to get everything I wanted to do in the session before it ends. It's more in that, are we done yet kind of way. So, and then that probably kicks in your anxiety, like, oh my gosh, I'm failing my client miserably. You start thinking, some other signs would be, you start thinking you're a terrible play therapist. You're not doing them any good. Your imposter syndrome is kicking in overtime. And you can tell your imposter syndrome is kicked in if, sorry, I got distracted by one of the comments. Sorry, I have to go. Sounds interesting. Yeah, well, feel free. You can always listen to the replay later. Your imposter syndrome kicks in. You know it's kicked in because you start thinking you're the worst play therapist that ever lived. The likelihood that you are the worst play therapist that ever existed in all of time is pretty slim to none. What that means is you really want to do a good job. You really want to help your clients, and you're afraid that you're not helping them. So your brain tells you that you're horrible and that you're doing a terrible job. So, and then another sign that you're feeling lost and stuck in play therapy is you start to worry about conversations with parents. You start to worry that they're not going to understand what play therapy is. They're not going to understand that you're doing important work in the playroom, because you think that they think you're just playing with their child. And so then you start doing things where you either avoid having conversations that need to be had with parents in a separate session, not with the child present, those parent consultation sessions, or however your model says you do sessions, but this would be a private conversation with parents. So you avoid having those conversations, or you find yourself so anxious that they're going to pull their child that you kind of bend over backwards doing anything and everything to prove that they should keep their child in play therapy, which a lot of times ends up contributing to some of the problem. So if you have ever experienced any of those, if you're experiencing them now, the likelihood you are feeling stuck in play therapy is probably pretty high, especially if you start feeling like it's not working, and then you kind of start throwing different interventions or activities. You kind of start, oh, I'm just going to try something new. I'm going to do this. And so you switch gears before your plan actually had a chance to take effect. And I call this the throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping something sticks method. It doesn't really work that well. And it's frustrating. You feel overwhelmed. You feel anxious. You start feeling a little burned out. You start feeling like, oh, maybe I'm not a good play therapist. Maybe I should get out of the field. Maybe I should stop working with children. So if you have felt those ways, if you're feeling those ways now, if you felt them in the past, then I have news for you. You are not the only one. We have all felt that way. Recognize the signs that you're feeling stuck and overwhelmed and your imposter syndrome is kicking in. And I'm going to share some tips about reasons why we get stuck, because then that is going to help you know what to do. So let me check in. We have some comments. Lindsay Ware, working with children. Welcome, Lindsay. She's in my Facebook group, Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. If you are a play therapist and you work with children and adolescents and families, and you are interested in joining the Facebook group, it's called Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. You can pop over there. You have to answer all the questions or you won't get in the group. So just make sure you answer all the questions. And if you're a mental health professional working with children, adolescents, and families using play and expressive arts, then that group might be helpful for you. Alrighty, so reasons we get stuck. So first of all, if you find yourself, a lot of times play therapists feel stuck because I find this one happens a lot, especially with child-centered play therapy, especially when you're learning it and you're still not really confident in your skills, then you're not really sticking with your play therapy model. You worry that it's not working, that you're not doing a good job, so you switch. You start doing more directive activities. Or maybe you're in an agency that really focuses on using short-term kind of directive, and you really want to use child-centered play therapy. A lot of times what I find happen is people start feeling stuck, lost, overwhelmed, and their imposter syndrome kicks in. So they start doing something that doesn't align with the model, and then you can get off track with that, because then you start getting into the spaghetti against the wall syndrome. So another reason why play therapists can feel stuck is that you're not really, I find this happens a lot. You're not really starting off with a really good psychosocial assessment to hone in on what exactly is the problem and why is it happening, because that's going to give you information about what is going on underneath the symptoms of your client's problems, so that you can target the root of the problem and get the change that really needs to happen. And this is one of the main reasons why I created my course, Getting Grounded Using Play Therapy Case Conceptualization, because what I found is I would be working with people doing consultation, and they would tell me what's going on, and they would want help, but there wouldn't be a clear understanding of what exactly is going on and why it's going on. So you can't really, unless you're using child-centered play therapy, which is a whole different way of using case conceptualization and treatment planning. If you're using the other ones, what'll happen is you start kind of throwing things, and somewhere along the line, usually definitely by the middle phase, you're feeling lost. Probably like 2 or 3 months in, you probably are feeling lost. And what I find is when play therapists don't take that first session to do a really good, thorough psychosocial assessment, asking all the questions, getting down deep and being a clinical, I call it being a clinical detective, like who done it? What is it? What is it that's going on? And how is this being sustained in the child system? So that's one of the reasons I created that course, Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Case Conceptualizations, to walk you step by step through that process. And I will talk a little bit more about that at the end. I really can't emphasize enough why I feel like this is really important to do and not to skip this step. Even for your more process-oriented play therapy models, I still think if you take that first session to get that information, it's going to help you, because then it's also going to be part of the solution on tips to getting unstuck. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I find that happens a lot is you're not doing that initial assessment and not using that information to show you how to, or what's going on with your client and how to formulate that case conceptualization, including, this is a big one, including how are parents or caregivers going to be involved in the change process. So it's going to be your case conceptualization and your treatment plan are influenced by your play therapy model. And children exist within the context of a family system. They are dependent upon their parents. Parents and caregivers are the therapeutic agents of change. So you really need to figure out how they're going to be involved in the change process. So this is also how your case conceptualization is tied to your treatment planning. Treatment planning is about, now that I know what the problem is and why it's happening, now I'm coming up with the plan of what we're going to do to facilitate that change, to get that healing and transformation that your clients are coming for. And so a lot of times what I typically recommend, and again, this is why I created these courses, Getting Grounded in Play Therapy, Case Conceptualization. And then I also recommend Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Treatment Planning. So now that you know what's happening and why it's happening, then you're going to walk through that treatment planning process that will ultimately result in an actual treatment plan. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end too, but these become part of the solution when you're feeling stuck. If you haven't done these, I would say there's a version of this that is even true for the more process-oriented, including child-centered play therapy, including some of the more like Gestalt that are more kind of, let's just kind of see where it goes. In those theory models, there's still structure. There's still each phase of treatment. There's still, how does that theory model apply what you do and how you facilitate those sessions in each stage of treatment. The play therapy model that you use is based on a theory, and application of theory means you're going to be going through each stage of the change process using your theory model. So keep this in mind, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, why this becomes part of the solution. So that one of the reasons people get stuck is because they haven't done these. Another reason people get stuck is, and we all, honestly, even more experienced people who've been doing it for a while, we work with families and children in families that are complex. The likelihood you're getting some high acuity family systems on your caseload is probably very high. High acuity means that they have a lot of challenges, and they are kind of stuck in those challenges. Maybe a generational history of trauma, attachment problems, addiction, poverty. The more you have children that come from family systems where there are generational histories of trauma, attachment, poverty, addiction, the likelihood they're going to have a lot more challenges or deficits. And part of the healing process is to help them get that to that higher level of functioning. So the likelihood you're going to have some of these families on your caseload is high. And it's hard. I always tell people that I work with in trainings and when I do consultation from a family systems standpoint, and I would say that's one of my foundations. My original training was family systems theory. I didn't do the individual theory in my social work program. I feel like we were like one of those, uh, I would say, unicorn social work programs at the time. They only did this like 1 or 2 years, where my whole training and focus was using family systems theory. And a lot of the early work was all about using family systems theory. And then I found this theory called attachment theory. And then I started learning about neuroscience along the way. And I was kind of hooked from there. The thing is, though, we're looking at children within these family systems. It's not a matter of if you get pulled into some of the maladaptive family patterns. It's a matter of how often and when. So, being some of the reasons you may be stuck is because you've gotten pulled in to that maladaptive pattern, those maladaptive relationship patterns that are happening in the family system. So you want to recognize that when it happens so that you can kind of get yourself out, because this will likely cause you to lose kind of sight of some of those underlying dynamics that are regularly occurring and negatively influencing your clinical decision making. So about how you're going to help your clients. So you definitely want to recognize those. So, what do you do about it? Now that you've recognized, oh, yep, I'm feeling stuck, and you've recognized some of the reasons you might be feeling stuck. Oh, I forgot to mention one of the reasons. So, one of the reasons you might be feeling stuck too is your imposter syndrome has kicked in and it's tapped into all your insecurities because you aren't feeling confident. So, then that's usually when you start doing the spaghetti against the wall approach, where you're just kind of throwing different uh, interventions out there to do those without any kind of rhyme or reason. You're just hoping something sticks. So, tips for getting unstuck. The first thing you want to do is take a step back. When you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, ready to give up, thinking you're the worst play therapist in the whole world, or you really want to fire your clients because it's just too much, and you're kind of in your head telling yourself the story, I'm not a good fit for them. Maybe that's true. I find more often than not, it's not really true. You're just feeling really overwhelmed and lost and frustrated. So, if that's the case, then I would say the first thing to do is take a step back. Give yourself a little permission to take a step back, take a breath, clear your head, just kind of do some mindfulness, do something just to clear your head about it. Secondly, the second thing you want to do is go back to your original case conceptualization and your treatment plan to kind of reorient yourself to what is going on with your clients and why is it going on. One of the things you may find is as you're getting to know your clients a little better, you may just kind of revise your case conceptual a little bit. You may even want to change your treatment plan a little bit. And if you get in there and you find there's more things going on, but that is what is kind of going to ground you to get you back on track. Going back to, okay, let me think about what exactly is going on and why is it happening? Okay, because of that, I figured did my treatment planning and identified these are the strategies. This is what needs to happen. This includes how parents are going to be involved. And when you have those high acuity families, then your strategies and your approach and your plan really do need to involve parents because they are the therapeutic agents of change. So, how have you integrated an intentional plan about how you're going to be working with parents? A lot of that's going to be influenced by your theoretical model. For example, if you're a child centered play therapist, you're going to be using those parent coaching sessions to help parents make those shifts. If you are using a different model that, like Adlerian play therapy, how are you integrating parents using Adlerian play therapy? If you're using a prescriptive approach, then what's your plan? Like I developed a model because I like getting all the family members in there. If you remember, my original training is family systems theory, and we just get them all in there. We get them all in there because if you really want to see what's going on, you get them all in there when possible. It's a little more challenging when you have divorced family systems. You're going to approach that a little differently. And which parts of the system are you getting in there? So your treatment planning and your case conceptualization, if you kind of take your step back and then go back to that to get reoriented or make some shifts if you need to, you want to do that. Families are complex. A lot of times what will happen is when you get into those middle phases, that's really where the deep level of change happens. And so at that point, a lot of the issues are going to be coming up during that time. And a lot of therapy is that therapeutic use of self. So even in play therapy, my therapeutic use of self, I am engaged in a therapeutic relationship. We've got that relational part of the change process using the therapeutic relationship to facilitate change, which means this is dynamic. This is going to activate all kinds of stuff. And you are the change agent in that case. And so recognizing, oh, okay, I got stuck and lost in here because I got pulled into what's going on. So let me go back to my case conceptualization and my treatment planning and figure out how I'm going to navigate this, because there are always going to be bumps along the way. Always. I have been working in the mental health field with children, adolescents, and families since 1992 when I graduated with my master's in social work. And I can tell you, I still sometimes get pulled in. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how often, and recognizing it and then getting back out. So when you're using your play therapy model and you're applying it through these different phases, this is what we call trust the process. Trust that your theoretical model will help you navigate those challenges. This to me is why it's really important to have a theoretical model that you're applying. Play therapy is more than just pulling out games and toys and art supplies and getting kids to talk. Play therapy uses that therapeutic play therapy model within the context of a therapeutic relationship. Your relationship is the glue. It is what gets everything through the process. That's what creates that safety and security. And your play therapy model dictates how your client will access those therapeutic powers of play. The therapeutic powers of play are what set play therapy apart. Understanding what those are, understanding how those are accessed. So you really want to use your model, trust the process, that when you're feeling stuck, when you've gotten off track, if you go back and you start applying the model, that it will guide you through all the stages of change. So The other thing is, if you've gotten lost, you want to ask yourself, um, am I applying my model accurately? Did I did I or did I get off track because my imposter syndrome kicked in? I was anxious, overwhelmed, and frustrated, and I was just wanting to find something that worked. You want to step back, look at your case conceptualization and your treatment planning, think about your play therapy model. Are you applying the model as it was intended? I find this happens a lot, especially for new play therapists who really want to use child-centered play therapy. I find a lot of times they feel lost and stuck, and so they think child-centered play therapy is not working, when in fact it really does if you apply the model. But they get worried, and so they start asking questions, getting directive. They start coming up with um, directive activities. If you really want to use child-centered play therapy and you've identified in your treatment planning process that child-centered play therapy will work for this specific client, then you want to stick with the process of using child-centered play therapy all the way through the process. That I find that one happens a lot because child-centered play therapy is not directive at all. Like, you can't ask questions, you can't direct anything. It's kind of totally opposite of grown-up mode. Like, as grown-ups, we think we have to be in charge, we have to do things, especially if you're in a setting that doesn't really understand child-centered play therapy. They will get off track. Some of the other models we will get off track as well, especially some of the more process oriented. But even some of the other ones, you can do more directive, like Gestalt, and some of the other more process oriented ones. You can do some directive activities. Child centered play therapy, you do not. If you're asking questions, you are not using child centered play therapy. If you are coming up with interventions, you are not using child-centered play therapy, you are doing something else. So if you're feeling stuck, you want to ask yourself, am I applying the model the way it's supposed to be applied? And then the third thing I mean, not third, but then the other thing that you can do is, if you're really feeling stuck and you've kind of tried all of these things, or you're just really feeling overwhelmed, ask for help. Get with a trusted colleague who's a play therapist, who even understands your play therapy model, or get with a consultant, somebody that you can talk to and get back on track. We can't do it alone. We all get stuck. We all need help. Go to some training. That'll help you get unstuck, get consultation, pay for consultation if you need to, get with a trusted colleague. So that is it for today. Let me do a quick recap for today. First and foremost, signs you're feeling stuck are that you're not making any progress using play therapy, is that you feel overwhelmed, confused, frustrated, your imposter syndrome is kicking in, you want to give up, you think you're the worst play therapist ever, you start having thought nothing's working, this isn't working, and you either want to stop, you feel like you have to get out of play therapy altogether, or you want to get rid of your client. So those are signs that you're probably feeling stuck. Then thinking about the reasons you get stuck are going to help you figure out how to get unstuck. So typically there are a few reasons people get stuck, but the two most common that I see as far as why people feel stuck and feel like it's not working is that you're switching around your play therapy theoretical model, you're not sticking with something, and you're doing the spaghetti against the wall syndrome, where you're just kind of throwing anything out there to see if anything sticks, which is probably just going to make it worse, to be honest, and then you'll get off track. The other thing that I find is not doing that thorough case conceptualization at the very beginning, taking that first session to meet with parents, depending on the age of the child, how the child's going to be involved. Like a 5-year-old, it's hard for them to sit through that. Or think about even how are you gathering all of that information in the beginning? Because you need that information to do your case conceptualization. Case conceptualization is you take all that detailed information and then do your clinical decision making about, all of these things point to this is probably what's happening, and here's why it's happening. Because then you're going to take that and it's going to help you figure out your treatment planning from there. They really are important steps and you don't want to skip those. So some things that you can do to get back on track, first and foremost, just take a breath, step back. If your imposter syndrome has kicked in, tell your imposter syndrome to shut up. And remind yourself you're not the worst play therapist. Why? And just clear your head. Maybe you just are feeling burned out because you're doing too much. Just take a step back. Take some time to yourself. Go do something you enjoy. That's the first thing. Take a break. Second thing is you want to really figure out, go back to your case conceptualization and your treatment planning. What was that? Do you need to revise them a little bit? And that's going to help you get reoriented to what's going on and how to help your clients overcome it. And then sometimes getting consultation from a trusted friend or a consultant, a professional, can be really, really useful if you're just really feeling stuck and you're not sure what to do, especially with some of the complex families. Again, it's not a matter of if you get stuck and overwhelmed and pulled into the maladaptive family patterns. It's a matter of when and how often and how quickly you recognize it to pull yourself back out. So that is it for today. If you're interested in some of my courses, especially, I have a few courses on there, Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Foundations. The ones I talked a lot about today are Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Case Conceptualization and Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Treatment Planning. In both of those, I walk you step by step. In case conceptualization, what questions should you ask? Why do you need to ask them? And taking all of that information and formulating an idea of, okay, what is going on? These are your clinical detective skills, figuring out what it is and why is it happening. And then you use that. And so in that course, I walk you through that process. We have 4 play therapy theoretical models that we use to walk through that process. And then there's some other things in there about making sure, and how is culture? How does culture play a role in what's going on, as well as what are some of the resiliency factors for your clients? Then with the treatment planning, that course walks you step by step through the treatment planning process. Like, what are some things you need to think about to come up with your plan, and then walking you through how to write a treatment plan that will satisfy most agencies and insurance companies. How do you take a play therapy model and put it into a treatment plan that actually makes a difference, doesn't feel like a waste of time, and that you can actually use? So if you're interested in any of those courses, I also have a course on writing progress notes. Same thing, walk you through what to look for in play therapy sessions, how to recognize themes, and then how do you take that information and write a concise, articulate, professional progress note that doesn't have too much information or not too little. That usually happens a lot. Just enough to get an understanding of what the story of your client. Your progress notes are your hero story, your client's story. How are they overcoming what they've overcome in treatment and kind of documents that through the change process. But how do you do that with play therapy? And so writing a progress note. If you're interested in those, pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com/courses. That's rhplaytherapytraining.com/courses. You can register for those. Here's the beauty of these courses. They are online. They're video modules with activities and workbooks and templates. So you can take these in your time zone when it's convenient for you. That's the beauty of these. And there are play therapy CEs for those. All righty. So I will see you next week. Have a good day. Bye for now.